third graders. It's time for another chapter or two in The Mouse and the Motorcycle by Beverly Cleary. I hope you're enjoying this book. We're just about halfway through it. So, chapter 8, A Family Reunion. Okay, if you'll recall, Ralph had been underneath the bed checking out the motorcycle, and the maid came in and was vacuuming and wasn't really paying attention to what she was doing, and she set the vacuum cleaner down, and it almost sucked Ralph up, and he was able to get away by jumping on the motorcycle, even though he had promised not to ride it, and he took off. And just as he did that, the maid turned off the vacuum cleaner, so he went faster than he thought he was going, and he wound up in a pile of sheets and got tossed into the laundry, and the only way out was to chew his way out. But he couldn't chew a motorcycle-sized hole. He could only chew a mouse-sized hole, so he had to leave the motorcycle behind. A family reunion. The next thing Ralph knew, his mother was shaking him by the shoulder. "Wake up," she said. "Ralph, wake up. Room service has brought us another meal." Room service? Ralph rubbed his eyes, not believing what he had heard. Room service has brought our dinner? Yes, a real feast. A whole blueberry muffin and a chocolate chip cookie, said Ralph's mother. Get up, we're having a family reunion. It all came back to Ralph. Oh, room service, he said, understanding at last. You mean the boy, Keith. He is room service to me. Ralph's mother sounded happy and carefree. Ralph sat up. Already his aunts and uncles and many squeaky cousins were arriving by the secret paths in the space between the walls. It was a long time since anyone had had enough food for a family reunion. There was rejoicing in the mouse nest for everyone but Ralph. He was thinking of the motorcycle he had lost and the promise he had broken. He had a dull, heavy feeling in the pit of his stomach and did not feel like celebrating. Why, there's Ralph, squeaked his Aunt Sissy, who thought she was better than the rest of the family because she lived in the bridal suite where she led her relatives to believe riches of rice fell on the carpet when the bride took off her hat and grooms shook out his coat. And it used to be a tradition that when the bride and groom were leaving at the end of the wedding, people would throw rice. And then people realized that it was kind of making birds sick, so they stopped throwing rice and started throwing bird seed, or even blowing bubbles, which is cool too. But it used to be rice. That's where that comes from. The rest of the family knew Aunt Sissy was not as grand as she pretended to be, because very few brides and grooms came to the hotel these days. My, how you've grown! Ralph never knew what to say when people told him that he had grown. Well, well, if it isn't Ralph, said Uncle Lester, who had the nest inside the wall in the housekeeper's office, where the maids dropped donut crumbs every morning at 10 o'clock when they had their coffee. What's this I hear about you riding up and down the halls on a motorcycle? Uncle Lester had a way of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. My land, a motorcycle, said old Aunt Dorothy. Isn't that pretty dangerous? Wouldn't mind riding one myself if I were a few years younger, said Uncle Lester. All the little cousins came crowding around Ralph. Show us your motorcycle, they squeaked. We want to ride it. Come on, give us a ride on the motorcycle, Ralph. Huh? Ralph, come on, Ralph, please. Ralph knew he was expected to be polite to all his relatives, even the squeaky little cousins. Well, embarrassed and ashamed, he looked down at the floor. I sort of lost the motorcycle in a pile of sheets and pillowcases. Lost the motorcycle? Oh, Ralph, cried his mother, genuinely alarmed. Ralph knew what she was thinking. Did this mean the end of room service? Did she have to go back to pilfering crumbs for his brothers and sisters? That's a young mouse for you, said the tactless Uncle Lester. Can't take care of anything. If anybody asks me, I think it's a good thing he lost it, said Aunt Dorothy. Riding a motorcycle is just plain foolhardy. All the little cousins looked disappointed and sulky. I don't think he ever had a motorcycle, said one. I bet he just made it up, said another, and the rest agreed. Ralph felt terrible. The family reunion swirled on around him. The muffin and cookie were divided. Cousins fought over the blueberries. Uncles, usually overweight uncles, asked for second helpings. Everybody talked at once. The little cousins finished their dinner and went racing around the mouse nest. The aunts and uncle raised their voices to be heard above the racket their children made. Suddenly there came from the knothole a noise that drowned out the squeaks and squeals of the young mice at play. Shh! Not a mouse moved. They looked at one another, too terrified to speak. Psst. Hey, Ralph, come on out, whispered Keith at the entrance of the mouse hole. Ralph's mother gave him a little shove, but no one spoke. With heavy feet, Ralph walked to the knothole, but he did not go out into room 215. What do you want? He asked. You and your family better be quiet in there. My mother will hear you. You know how she is about mice, Keith said. I don't know why people say things like as quiet as mice. You sound like you're a pretty noisy bunch to me. Behind Ralph, his relatives began to tiptoe quietly to their own homes, leaving his mother to do all the cleaning up. Did you have a nice picnic? Ralph asked, dreading what he must tell the boy. Yes, we saw an old mining town with real jails with bars on the windows. Keith reached into his pocket and pulled out something curved and hard and white with a rubber band fastened to it with a piece of Scotch tape. I brought you a present, he said. Come on out. Puzzled and curious, Ralph squeezed through the knothole. What is it? He asked. Whenever the object was, he had never seen anything like it. Half a ping-pong ball I found down in the game room, said Keith. See? I patted the inside with thistledown and anchored a rubber band to the top with Scotch tape. What for? Said Ralph. He did not understand. A crash helmet for you. Keith set the half ping-pong ball on Ralph's head and slipped the rubber band carefully around his whiskers until it rested on under his chin. There, that's just right. You'll need it big so that there's plenty of room for your ears. When you ride a motorcycle, you need to wear a crash helmet. Ralph peered at Keith from under his new crash helmet, which rested lightly on his head. He knew he looked every inch a motorcycle racer, but never in his whole life had he felt so ashamed. He longed to crawl off into his hole and never face Keith again, but his conscience, which until now he did not know he had, would not let him. Talk about taking responsibility for your actions, right? Yeah. There was nothing to do but stand there in the fine new crash helmet and confess. Might as well know, he told Keith. I lost the motorcycle. Lost the motorcycle? Keith, who had been kneeling, sat back on his heels. But how? I rode it by mistake into a pillowcase and a heap of linen on the floor and got dumped into the laundry hamper, confessed Ralph. You rode it into a pillowcase? Repeated Keith. You weren't supposed to ride it in the daytime. You promised. I know, Ralph agreed miserably. I didn't exactly mean to ride it. But you did. Keith's voice was accusing. Well, you see, the maid was vacuuming under the bed and I... began Ralph and then stopped. What's the use? I wrote it and I lost it and it's probably gone to the laundry by now and I'm sorry. The boy and the mouse were silent. Both were thinking about the little motorcycle with its clean lines and a pair of shiny chromium exhaust pipes. That motorcycle was my most favorite of my cars, said Keith. I saved my allowance and bought it myself. Ralph hung his head in his crash helmet. There was nothing more he could say. It was a terrible thing he had done. I guess I should have known that you weren't old enough to be trusted with a motorcycle, said Keith. The boy could not have said anything that would hurt Ralph more. Chapter 9. Ralph Takes Command. It was a sad night for Ralph, a sad and lonely night. If he went back to the mouse hole, his mother was sure to worry him with embarrassing questions about the motorcycle. She would also expect him to clean up after the family reunion. If he took off his crash helmet, he could squeeze under the door and explore the hall on foot, but he could not bear to part with the helmet, and anyway, he had no desire to travel by foot where he had once ridden with such noise and speed. Ralph scurried through the shadows on the floor to the curtain, which he climbed to the windowsill. There he sat, huddled and alone, staring out into the night, listening to the kissing sounds of the bats as they jerked and zigzagged from the eaves of the hotel, through the pines and back again. Around the window, the leaves of a Virginia creeper vine shifted in the breeze. Down in the lobby, a clock struck midnight. An owl slid silently through the night across the clearing of the parking lot, from one pine to another. Ralph could remember a time when he had envied bats and owls their ability to fly, but that was before he had experienced the speed and power of a motorcycle. Early in the morning, the smell of bacon drifted up from the kitchen and brought back all of Ralph's dreams of the ground floor. It was not long until he was embarrassed to discover that Keith was awake and was lying in bed, quietly watching him. "Hi," said Keith. "Oh, hello." Ralph wished he had returned to the mouse hole before dawn. "Well, I guess it's time for me to go home to bed." Keith sat up. "Don't go yet. Wait until my folks get up." Ralph leapt to the floor. "I don't think you would want to talk to me after I lost your motorcycle." "Well, I may never have another chance to talk to a mouse." Ralph was flattered. It had never occurred to him that the boy would consider talking to a mouse anything special. "Well, what would you like for breakfast?" asked Keith. "You mean we still get room service after what I did?" "Sure." Keith pulled his knees up under his chin and wrapped his arms around his legs. "You mean you aren't mad at me anymore?" asked Ralph. "I guess you might say that I'm mad, but I'm not real mad," Keith decided. "I've been lying here thinking, wouldn't be right for me to be real mad because I get in messes myself. My mom and dad tell me I don't stop and use my head." Ralph nodded. "I guess that's my trouble too. I don't stop and use my head." "They say I'm in too much of a hurry," said Keith. "They say I don't want to take my time to learn to do things properly." Ralph nodded again. He understood. If he had waited until he had learned to ride the motorcycle, he never would have ridden off the bedside table and into the wastebasket. "I'll never forget the first time I rode a bicycle with handbrakes," reminisced Keith. "I took right off down a hill. I'd always ridden bicycles with foot brakes, and when I got going too fast, I tried to put on the foot brakes, only there weren't any." "What happened?" Ralph was fascinated. "Well, by the time I remembered to use the handbrakes, I hit a tree and took an awful spill." Somehow the story made Ralph feel better. He was not the only one who got into trouble. "The hard part is," continued Keith, "I am in a hurry, and I don't want to do kid things. I want to do big things, real things. I want to grow up." "You look pretty grown up to me," said Ralph. "Maybe to a mouse," conceded Keith, "but I want to look grown up to grown-ups." "So do I," said Ralph with feeling. "I want to grow up and go down to the ground floor." "Everybody tells me to be patient," said Keith, "but I don't want to be patient." "Me neither," agreed Ralph. Someone stirred next door in room 216. "I guess I better be running along," said Ralph. "Say, about that breakfast." "Sure, what do you want?" "How about some bacon?" suggested Ralph, remembering the fragrance that had floated up to the windowsill. "And some toast?" "With jelly," agreed Ralph, and ran off to the mouse hole, eager to tell his family that things were not so bad after all. They were still entitled to room service. But when Ralph reached the mouse hole, he found pandemonium. His brothers and sisters and cousins were all huddled together, squeaking with fright. His mother picked up a bunch of shredded Kleenex and put it down again, only to pick up another bunch, as if she didn't know what to do with it. Uncle Lester and Aunt Dorothy were there, stuffing crumbs into their mouths as if they expected never to eat again. "Dear me," Ralph's mother was saying, "whatever shall we do? Oh, Ralph, there you are at last. Where on earth have you been? Never mind, we haven't time." "Time for what?" asked Ralph. "What's going on around here anyway?" "The housekeeper! Your Uncle Lester! The sheets!" "Oh, do be quiet, everybody." Ralph's mother was so agitated she could not tell her son what was wrong. Uncle Lester swallowed a mouthful of crumbs. "It's like this, Ralph. The housekeeper discovered a hamper full of sheets and towels and pillowcases with holes chewed in them." "Uh-oh," thought Ralph. Whatever had happened was all his fault. He might have known. "I heard her telephoning the manager about it from her office," continued Uncle Lester. "The manager came up and called all the maids and the bellboys and everyone to look at the holes chewed in the sheets. It was quite a powwow." "The motorcycle," thought Ralph. "What happened to the motorcycle? There might be a chance that it did not go to the laundry after all." You didn't happen to see a motorcycle in the housekeeper's office, did you?" he ventured. "I was listening, not looking out," said Uncle Lester. I am not foolhardy like some people around here." "Ralph, you know what this means." His mother managed to pull herself together to say that much. "It means a war on mice," said Aunt Dorothy ominously. "It means traps, Poisons, said Uncle Lester. Who knows, this time the management might spend the extra money on an exterminator. We shall have to flee. There's nothing else to do. And if we flee, the owls will get us, said Ralph's mother, causing the brothers and sisters and cousins to set up an awful squeal. Shh! The mother mouse fluttered her paws in alarm. Flee? Ralph was bewildered. Flee? And leave room service? Room service! Exclaimed his mother. How can we expect room service after you lost that poor boy's motorcycle? It's all right, Ralph assured his mother, who could not resist adding rather proudly, I've already ordered. Room service is bringing us bacon and toast with jelly. The news silenced everyone. A breakfast of bacon and toast with jelly delivered to the mouse's nest without first being dropped on the carpet was not to be abandoned lightly. We want some jelly! We want some jelly! All the little cousins began to squeak. Be quiet, ordered Uncle Lester. Do you want them to find us? Ralph knew that no matter what the others chose to do, he was not going to flee from the hotel, not until he found out what had happened to the motorcycle. He was very sure of this, and all at once he felt calm and clear-headed as he had never felt before. He knew exactly what his family should do. Be quiet, everyone, Ralph ordered, standing up straight so all his relatives could see him. I will tell you what we're going to do. See here, Ralph, interrupted Uncle Lester. You're pretty young to be giving orders to your elders. Now, Lester, said Aunt Dorothy, listen up to Ralph. After all, he has our food brought up by room service. No one else in the history of the family has managed that. This silenced Uncle Lester, and Ralph was allowed to continue. What we should do is keep quiet for a few days. Here he looked down at his little cousins, who for once in their lives were not squeaking. I will arrange for room service to bring our meals so we won't have to go scrambling around in the woodwork or scrounging around in the rooms. That way, we won't be tempted to taste any poisoned food or go near any traps. And if the management doesn't see or hear us for a few days, they'll forget about us. They always do. Now, wait a minute, said Uncle Lester. This boy won't be here that long. How do you know it? You know how it is with people. Here today, gone tomorrow. Ralph had the answer. It's only Sunday. He will be here until Tuesday because Monday is the 4th of July, and his father said he won't drive in holiday weekend traffic. He always brings us plenty. If we don't stuff ourselves, we can save enough to last until management forgets us. Uncle Lester nodded thoughtfully. Seems like a sound idea. Yes, but Ralph, there is one thing that worries me, said his mother. How are we going to tip room service? When people have a waiter bring food to the room, they always give him a coin or two for their service. We haven't any money. Ralph had not thought of this. If we're going to continue to accept room service, we must do the right thing, insisted his mother. Don't worry, I'll think of something, promised Ralph in a grand way that he had acquired since he had ordered a meal sent up to the mouse nest. Okay, so problems and solutions, right? Problem is, they found out about the mice because Ralph had chewed through the sheets, and the result is that they're going to set out poisons and traps. And so Ralph's got a solution. We'll see tomorrow if it's going to work. Miss you guys. I miss reading to you. I miss sharing this with you and seeing your reactions. I love you lots. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.